Aliyah, you had those two early fouls and had to sit for most of the first half. How did that affect your flow and your sequence of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even able to get into a flow. I mean, I played the second half. I think it's super hard to try and figure out and understand how the refs are calling it. I think it's super hard to get charged fouls when I don't think anyone's in legal position. I mean, shout out to the Valks. I mean, they did a great job selling it, and the refs bought it, to be honest, so good for them.
Coach, this is
Aliyah Boston walked into that post-game press conference and she was done being polite about it because what happened during the Indiana Fever versus Golden State Valkyries game wasn't just a heartbreaking loss. It was a 40-minute mugging where the refs handed the Valkyries a rulebook that only applied to one team. Letitia Amahire flopped her way against Aliyah Boston. Veronica Burton threw an elbow into Caitlin Clark's face and didn't get called for a flagrant. And somehow Indiana still nearly won. The corrupt WNBA referees are at it again. This time denying Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever their fourth straight victory after Caitlin Clark's record-breaking night. Do you think the refs cost the Fever the game? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I don't know. The referees were horrible tonight. Horrible. These referees were the MVP tonight. They're probably going to celebrate in the locker room for him. Terrible game. Caitlin Clark gang her jersey being grabbed by Burton. No call though. Then on before that play her arm was grabbed. No call. It's like they just allow things to happen. Sometimes it feels like it's rigged half the time. 6 days before their rematch at the Chase Center, the Fever and Valkyries already had something going. The May 22nd game in Indianapolis wasn't just physical in the way that every WNBA game has some contact. It was grab her, hold her, elbow her physical, and Clark left that game with actual scratches on her arms to prove it. Not bruises from a hard screen or a little court burn. Scratches, visible marks from 40 minutes of defenders treating her like someone to be worn down rather than guarded. Right before the break we got a little John going on. Caitlin says, "Hey you and me Hayes? You and me. This is how you bring the roof down." All tied up here with 514 to go. Golden State came into Indianapolis with a very specific plan and coach Natalie Nikasi wasn't hiding it. She wanted multiple bodies on Clark all night because as Nikasi put it, Clark can shoot from like half court so you can't give her any air at all. The Valkyries trapped her off ball screens, switched everything, and just kept rotating different defenders at her so she couldn't settle into a rhythm with any one matchup. And Clark knew exactly what was coming. She noted before the game that every guard is going to probably guard me at some points, which is a pretty calm way to describe what was essentially a coordinated physical operation against one player. It nearly turned into a full situation right before halftime when Clark and Janelle Salon got into it and both players picked up technical fouls. That's the temperature this game was playing at. Not frustrated at a bad call tension but about to boil tension. The kind where one more thing could set the whole thing off. Clark managing back soreness on top of everything else kept producing anyway because that's just what she does when teams decide to make it ugly. You talked about last game, it certainly got a little bit heated and I know you have some back and forth with different players. Do you expect any of that to carry over or is it sort of a new thing each game? I mean for myself like you're just a competitor and you leave it on the court. I don't think there's anything that you carry over into the next game. At least for I'm going to speak for me. I don't know about the other side but yeah for me like I approach every game the same way. It's not I don't have any bad blood with any sort of players in this league. Like it's just a competitive fire. That's the competitive fire my teammates play with too. So, I don't come in here with any sort of mindset that's different than any way I approach any other game. But, so, when the rematch got put on the schedule for May 28th in San Francisco, nobody on either side thought it was going to be a clean, flowing basketball game. The Valkyries left Indianapolis feeling like their blueprint worked well enough to run it back. And Clark went in already knowing she'd spend 40 minutes fighting for every catch, every drive, every inbounds touch. The pre-game framing called it a marquee showdown between top defenses and top offenses, which sounds great until you realize that for Clark specifically, it just meant Veronica Burton in her face from the opening tip with no relief coming. Clark also knew the crowd would be different. She anticipated the Chase Center being loud and hostile, the opposite of what she usually gets, where Fever fans travel everywhere and make every gym feel like home. In Golden State, the crowd was going to be against her from the start. Loud and into it. Burton pressing her, the length of Golden State's roster making every pass a problem, back soreness, road crowd, and none of that ended up being the worst part of the night. Like I said, I do expect to be competitive. I do expect to be physical. I think those are the things that, were probably most prevalent in the first game. And you never know in the way they're going to call it too. That can impact the game. If they call it from the start, it might not be as physical. You just never know. So, both teams want to play with great pace. I expect it to be fast. I expect it to be a little bit more up-tempo, especially since last time they were coming off a back-to-back. I thought they kind of slowed it down a little bit more. So I expect them to play with a little bit more pace, but, yeah. Aliyah Boston finished with 13 points and 6 rebounds. And on paper that looks like an off night. It wasn't. She did all of that in severely limited minutes because she spent the game in foul trouble. That when you go back and watch the replays, makes almost no sense at all. Aliyah Boston, the worst officiated player in WNBA history. She was fouled out the whole first half just for moving. Her South Carolina teammate just kept flopping. There's another one just getting her post presence, but she can't do it. They won't let her. Boston picked up 4 fouls and at least 3 of them were charge calls, meaning the refs decided she was the one doing something wrong. The problem is that when you actually look at the plays, the defender wasn't set, wasn't in legal guarding position, or was already falling backward before Boston even made real contact. That's not a charge. That's an actor waiting for her cue. Boston herself put it plainly after the game. I think it's super hard to get charge fouls when I don't think anyone's in legal position. She wasn't venting. She was describing exactly what happened play by play. Boy, this girl flops. She is an embarrassment. Watch her flop her head back. How embarrassing. She works more on throwing her head back. Oh, you're an embarrassment to the game, girl. Look at that. Look at that. The biggest culprit was Letitia Amahira, who ran the same scheme over and over. Slide close to Boston, initiate the lightest possible contact, throw her body backward dramatically and wait. Amahir weighs around 118 pounds. So when Boston, a full interior post player, so much as breathes near her, the visual looks bad even when the play is completely clean. And the refs kept falling for it. Not once, not twice. Consistently enough that Boston picked up 2 of her fouls in quick succession early in the second quarter and spent the rest of the first half on the bench. 0 points, 2 rebounds in the entire first half. That's what Amahir's flopping act cost Indiana before halftime even arrived. I wasn't a fan of that. I wasn't a fan of that. But I thought she stayed within her cylinder there and she's stronger. We know that. We didn't need her falling to know that Leah was stronger than, when your best post player can't move freely because one more bad call sits her for the game. Your whole offense shifts around that problem. Indiana couldn't run the inside-out attack they wanted because Boston wasn't on the floor to hold the paint. Clark was getting swarmed on the perimeter with no interior presence pulling defenders away. And Golden State absolutely knew it. You could see it in how aggressively they packed the paint every time Clark caught the ball on the wing. Watch the replays on those charge calls and you can see Amahir's feet still moving when the whistle blows. Her body's going backward before Boston's weight even transfers into the contact. Those weren't basketball plays. They were performances and 3 different referees bought them on the same night against the same player. It's a foul. Boston has 2. I am wipe away the offensive foul. Boston has 2. I am. Boston still grabbed 6 rebounds and scored 13 points in whatever minutes she actually got to play, which tells you what a full game from her looks like when nobody's flopping her onto the bench. She dominated the glass and finished in the paint every time she was actually out there. And Stephanie White was stuck managing rotations she never wanted to run in the first place. Fourth quarter, game on the line, and Veronica Burton threw an elbow directly into Caitlin Clark's face during an inbounds play. Not a hand in the face fighting for a loose ball. Not incidental contact on a drive through traffic. An elbow to the face on an inbounds play where Clark wasn't even in an aggressive defensive position. The refs reviewed it. They looked right at it and called nothing. And then look at this. Lexi gets pushed in the back on the missed free throw. They don't call that one either. And then Caitlin Clark, fever down by 3, gets elbowed in the nose. A flagrant foul there awards Indiana free throws and gives them the ball back with the score sitting at 88-89 and 16 seconds left. That's not a small thing. That's free points plus possession at exactly the moment Golden State was trying to close the door. And instead of getting that call, Indiana got nothing while Clark stood there having just taken an elbow to the face in front of everyone watching. Burton had been in Clark's body all night because that was the entire Valkyries' defensive plan. Every catch, every drive, every inbounds touch, Burton stayed physical and the whistle stayed quiet. Clark shot 8 free throws and knocked down all 8 of them. So, it's not like she never got to the line, but the contact she absorbed throughout the game went way beyond what those 8 calls covered. The elbow was the most blatant moment in a night full of moments that never got called. And then here we go. Sophie plays great defense, but guess what they do? Call another foul. And then Sophie Cunningham gets fouled. They don't call it on that side of the floor. Gets belly bumped, then her arm grabbed. That's not her hand. Golden State had already gone on a 15-2 run that flipped the game's momentum earlier. So, Indiana was already climbing back into it when the Burton play happened. Clark's only fourth-quarter points came from a single three-pointer, which tells you how much the defensive pressure and physical toll affected her aggression down the stretch. She finished with 16 points, 6 assists, and 3 steals in 29 minutes, fighting for every single thing she got while Burton contested every catch and the refs watched. The WNBA's flagrant foul rule covers unnecessary contact to the head or face of a player. That's the actual language. What Burton did on that inbounds play fits that language directly. And Valkyries' coach, Natalie Nicozzi, even challenged the call, which means everyone in that building knew the play needed a second look. The refs gave it a second look and still didn't call it a flagrant. Indiana lost a possession they desperately needed, and the game ended with them on the wrong side of a result they were close enough to change. But this one's way worse. Watch this. Like seriously, full arm extension pushes Caitlin Clark. You think they called a foul? If Caitlin Clark did that, somebody would have flopped 10 feet and Caitlin Clark would have probably got a turnover and a foul. And then they call this a foul on Caitlin after they just did 2 offensive fouls. They didn't call. And then look at this. She slaps down on Hines Allen's arms. Look at that. Look at her right arm. You could clearly see her grab that right arm. Look at that. Burton finished with 25 points and a career-high 5 blocks. Gabby Williams dropped 19. Golden State's defense produced 11 blocks total. So, yes, the Valkyries were genuinely good on that end of the floor. But there's a difference between winning because you're good and winning because the officials let you be physical without consequence. And on May 28th in San Francisco, the Valkyries got to be both. With Boston sitting in foul trouble she didn't earn and Clark absorbing elbows without a whistle. Indiana needed somebody off the bench to keep this game from slipping away entirely. And Raven Johnson stepped up in a way nobody on the Valkyries sideline saw coming. Johnson scored a career-high 16 points on 7 for 10 shooting, which in a game this chaotic and this physical against one of the best defenses in the league is just a flat-out outstanding performance. Cunningham leaking out. 90 seconds to play here in the third quarter. Johnson to Boston. Back to Thompson. Cat shoots, fires, hits. Johnson changed Indiana's tempo every time she checked in, bringing pace and aggression that Golden State's defense hadn't spent the week preparing for. And Stephanie White trusted her enough to keep her on the floor during defensive possessions late in the game, which isn't something you do with a bench player you're just riding a hot streak with. That's coaching trust you build through actual performance. And Johnson earned it on the road in a hostile building against a team that just held most of Indiana's starters in check all night. If White isn't finding Johnson more consistent minutes going forward, that's a rotation question worth asking out loud. Too strong on the left side. Cunningham for 3. Just the second three-point make here for the Fever. Sophie Cunningham scored 11 points and also caught the pass that put Clark in the record books. Clark found her with a precise cross-court pass that became the 500th career assist and Cunningham knocked it down clean. Clark is now the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 500 career assists. And she already owns the same record for reaching 1,000 career points. She did all of this with Veronica Burton pressing her body all night with no flagrant foul protection on a road court in a game Indiana desperately needed to win. That's the night she played. Historic numbers produced under conditions that would have knocked most guards completely off their game. They force another turnover. Clark, the quick pass, whips it right to Cunningham. 500 career assists for Caitlin Clark, the fastest to do it in WNBA history. Clark finished with 16 points, 6 assists and 3 steals, and shot a perfect 8 for 8 from the free throw line. Kelsey Mitchell put up 14 points, also shooting well from the line. And Indiana's 90% free throw shooting as a team kept them within striking distance during stretches when field goals weren't falling. That discipline at the line mattered because it kept the deficit close enough that the fourth quarter officiating decisions had real weight. If Indiana gets blown out, the Burton elbow no call is just another bad moment in a forgettable game. They weren't blown out. So every wrong call actually changed the result. Points here off the bench, but like you talked about, not just their scoring, the things that don't show up on the box score. That block is going to show up on the box score though. I can promise. Lexi Hull and Michaela Timpson both came up with defensive plays that stopped Golden State from pulling away earlier in the game. And neither of those contributions show up in a box score in any way that does them justice. But Indiana staying close enough for the fourth quarter to matter didn't happen by accident. Some of the criticism about Stephanie White's late game decisions, specifically switching everything defensively and struggling with execution down the stretch, is fair. White herself would probably agree there are things she'd run differently, but a lot of those late-game problems trace directly back to Boston sitting on the bench in foul trouble she never should have been in. Because when your interior anchor can't play freely, your entire defensive structure shifts and no amount of coaching adjustments fully covers that hole. Aliyah, you had those 2 early fouls and had to sit for, most of the first half. How does that affect your flow and see how you're going to beat it? Yeah, I wasn't even able to get into a flow. I played the second half. I think it's super hard to try and figure out and understand how the refs are calling it. I think it's super hard to get charge fouls when I don't think anyone's in legal position. Shout out to the Val. They did a great job selling it and the rest bought it, to be honest. So good for them. Aliyah, Boston sat down at that post-game press conference and didn't perform the usual diplomatic disappointment that athletes do when they lose a tough road game. She was specific and she was direct, and you could see it all over her face before she even opened her mouth. She knew exactly which calls were wrong. She knew what Amihiri pulled out there. And she wasn't pretending the officiating was just a neutral background factor in a close loss. Boston isn't someone who flips tables and points fingers every time things go badly. She doesn't make scenes. So when she sits at that press conference table looking like she did on May 28th, it's because what happened on that floor was genuinely indefensible and she'd watched every second of it up close. 3 phantom fouls from Amihir's flopping act ate her minutes in a game Indiana needed her most. And then she watched the refs look directly at Burton driving an elbow into Clark's face in the fourth quarter and call absolutely nothing. Not a flagrant nothing. Boston saw all of it and she was done pretending it was fine. What kind of challenges defensively did the Valkyries present from an athletic standpoint? They're big. They're pretty long. I think on some of those traps they were able to get in the pass lanes a little bit. But they're just super athletic. They're athletic group and they played a lot of energy on the defensive end. And here's what makes that Burton no call even worse. A flagrant foul there doesn't just give Indiana free throws. With the score at 88-89 and 16 seconds left, it potentially sends the game to overtime. That's the call the refs swallowed. Meanwhile, Clark herself got hit with a flagrant foul call for a screen earlier in the game. So, the standard wasn't being applied anywhere close to evenly. The refs found a flagrant when Clark set a screen and couldn't find one when Burton's elbow connected with Clark's face. That's not inconsistency. That's a pattern. Clark gets bodied more than almost any guard in the league and draws fewer foul calls than the contact warrants. And that's not a new observation from one bad night. Boston's interior game keeps getting derailed by charge calls that fall apart the second you watch the replay. If the WNBA's officiating crews won't protect these players the way the rule book says they should, then the league's basically telling every team that physical intimidation against Indiana is a free strategy with no real cost. Indiana's still headed to the 2026 playoffs. Clark's rewriting records at a pace nobody in WNBA history has matched. Boston's a double-double threat even when she's stuck in foul trouble she never earned. Johnson just proved she can go for a career high in a road game against a top defense. Cunningham, Mitchell, Hull, Johnson, they're all building something real together in Indianapolis. And the talent on this roster is absolutely good enough to compete for a championship. But none of that closes the gap if opponents keep getting a free pass to foul Clark without a whistle and flop their way into benching Boston every time Indiana needs her. The Fever were good enough to win that game in San Francisco. The officiating made sure they didn't. Do you think the refs cost the Fever the game? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Click the video on the screen and we will see you in the next.